I used to wake up every day feeling like something was wrong with me. Everyone around me seemed to be moving forward, and I just couldn't figure out why I was falling behind, even though I was doing everything I was supposed to. It took me years to realize I didn't hate my life because it was bad, I hated it because it wasn't mine. And I think that's what a lot of people really mean when they say, I hate my life. It's not about failure, it's about disconnection. So let's talk about why so many of us end up here, even when we're doing everything society tells us we're supposed to. You can only outrun discomfort for so long before it catches up to you. And when it doesn't explode. It seeps in slowly. You notice it during your commute, on a quiet Saturday, or even halfway through a vacation you were excited for. Those first few days feel amazing. New place, no responsibilities, but then the dread creeps in. Not because the vacation went wrong, but because you can already feel the pull of life waiting for you when it's over. A life that's comfortable enough to tolerate, but empty enough to make you want to run away from it. For me, that realization hit during a long-awaited vacation I had planned almost a year in advance. The day I was leaving, I had this deep wave of relief in my mind. Finally, a week where I didn't have to think about deadlines, emails, or the next crisis. The first few days were incredible. A new city, good food, and actual laughter. For the first time in months, I felt alive again. But on that third night, something shifted. A quiet dread crept in, the kind you can't quite name, as I realized the trip was already halfway over. Each night after that, the countdown grew louder. By the fifth day, I couldn't fully enjoy the present moment because part of me was already mourning its end. That's when I realized the problem wasn't the vacation, it was the life I was returning to. I didn't need more escapes, I needed a life that didn't feel like something to recover from. That's the kind of exhaustion that most people mistake for burnout. But it's not the workload that drains you, it's the misalignment. You're spending your energy maintaining something that doesn't actually fulfill you. And when you finally slow down, your brain does what it's been avoiding. It notices the truth. Discomfort has a strange honesty about it. It's the mind's way of telling you that the story you're living no longer matches who you are. We're so used to treating pain like something to fix that we forget sometimes it also informs. The exhaustion you feel from doing everything right isn't weakness, it's evidence that you're investing energy into a version of you that doesn't really give you anything back. The point of rest isn't escape, it's clarity. And when your rest stops restoring you, that's the sign that you're no longer resting from the effort, you're recovering from avoidance. So you scroll, you binge another series, you fill your time with noise because silence feels like confrontation. You don't escape because you're weak, you escape because you don't know how to rebuild a life that doesn't constantly feel like recovery. And that's not your fault. Most of us were taught to survive, not design. The difference between surviving and designing is intention. Survive reacts, and design reflects. It asks, what kind of life could I create if I stopped living only to make discomfort disappear? If this video is hitting close to home, hit like or subscribe. It helps this channel grow and helps the message reach more people who might need to hear it. From the time you're old enough to be graded, you're told what success looks like. Good grades, good job, good reputation. You learn to chase approval before you even know what fulfillment feels like. We spend years learning how to please, not how to live. The problem is, once those external expectations disappear, we're left with the life we never designed, and no idea how to rebuild it. We don't outgrow that need for approval, we just change the people we chase it from. Teachers become bosses, friends become metrics, and the pattern stays the same. And for a while, it works. You build a life that earns nods from others, but at some point, you realize the applause doesn't sound as good as you hoped. It starts early. You pick classes that look impressive, not interesting. You choose stability over passion because that's what you're told responsible adults do. And you stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, what's expected of me? That's how a lot of people end up living lives that look complete but feel hollow. They're performing success, not experiencing it. We spend years optimizing for validation without ever realizing it. When the people around you approve, it feels like progress, but what it really creates is dependence. You start confusing acceptance with purpose, comfort with direction, and recognition with meaning. And when the recognition fades, so does your sense of identity. You aren't lazy, you're just emotionally undernourished by a life built on applause instead of alignment. You're not ungrateful, you're just drained from effort that feeds everyone's expectations except your own. It's hard to feel free when your choices were made for someone else's approval. That's why motivation fades, because deep down you're powering a machine that doesn't serve you anymore. The longer you keep pretending that achievement equals alignment, the heavier it gets. Here's the irony. The world rewards conformity while your soul craves authenticity. And every time you silence that craving to fit the mold, you lose a little more connection with who you actually are. Eventually, even success starts to feel hollow, not because it's meaningless, but because it came at the cost of meaning. And when that realization finally hits, autopilot kicks in. Not out of apathy, but out of self-preservation. Autopilot feels safe because it's predictable. You wake up, follow the routine, check off the boxes, and in a strange way, the predictability becomes its own comfort. But comfort without meaning turns into emptiness. Fine is a dangerous word in adulthood. Fine convinces you that you're okay when you're quietly fading out of your own story. Days start to blur together, not because you're busy, but because none of them feel different enough to remember. When you've been moving for so long, stillness starts to feel like failure. But stillness isn't failure. It's the first step toward awareness. It's where you finally start to notice what feels off, what doesn't fit, and what's quietly asking for change. Autopilot is the illusion of stability, a system built to avoid the discomfort of change. But what you call stability, your soul experiences as stagnation. That's why, even when life is good, you still feel restless. Because deep down you know peace isn't the absence of motion, it's the presence of meaning. And meaning doesn't survive long in maintenance mode. So the question isn't, am I moving forward? It's, am I moving consciously? You don't have to blow up your life to wake up. You just have to start noticing where you've been asleep. And the moment you do, something starts to shift. You begin to see what felt like stagnation was really an invitation to realign. Awareness always starts as discomfort. That's how you know it's real. It interrupts you. The things that make you uncomfortable aren't punishments, they're invitations to wake up to something more honest. When you've been on autopilot long enough, you forget what your own voice sounds like. You start overthinking every decision because you no longer trust your instincts. You spent so much time editing yourself to fit expectations that the unfiltered version of you feels like a stranger. You think you're indecisive, but really you just learn to silence your inner voice out of habit. It's not that you're shy, it's that it doesn't feel safe to be fully seen by others when you've forgotten who you really are. That's what disconnection feels like. Not a dramatic breakdown, but a quiet distance from who you really are. That distance grows when your inner voice becomes a place you avoid instead of visit. You learn to outsource identity, to social media, to friends, to work, hoping reflection will come from validation. But self-trust is built in solitude, not in applause. When you stop outsourcing meaning, you remember how capable you are of creating it. The truth is, the version of you that feels missing isn't gone. It's just buried under noise. And reconnection doesn't start with a big breakthrough. It starts with 10 quiet minutes a day. No scrolling, no music, and no input. Just you. At first, it feels uncomfortable, like you're trying to hold a conversation with someone you haven't spoken to in years. But over time, that quiet starts to sound like peace again. And that's when everything else, your creativity, your motivation, and your purpose slowly start to come back online. The hardest part isn't rediscovering yourself, it's believing that your unfiltered self deserves space again. But once you do, your energy shifts. You stop chasing belonging and start embodying it. And that's when life stops being about proving something and starts being about expressing something. You might hate your life right now, and that's valid, because it's not easy to keep showing up when everything else feels heavy and repetitive. But what if that hatred isn't the problem? What if it's the signal? The sign that something inside of you is ready to evolve. You don't hate your life because you're broken. You hate it because it no longer fits the person you're becoming. The feeling isn't weakness, it's awareness. It's your mind saying, this version of me has run its course. And awareness hurts because it demands change. But it's also the first step toward real peace. If your life feels wrong, that's not failure, that's feedback. You don't have to have it all figured out, you just have to start paying attention to what feels right and follow it. Once you stop performing and start designing, peace stops being something you chase and becomes the way you live. Fulfillment stops being temporary, you stop surviving your days and start inhabiting them again. The real reason you hate your life isn't because it's hopeless, it's because you're ready to stop outsourcing your worth. You're ready to trade the safety of predictability for the freedom of purpose. And that trade is what transformation really looks like. It's messy, uncertain, and completely necessary. Because life doesn't change in a single breakthrough. It changes in the small, consistent moments where you choose honesty over habit. If you had a desire to click on this video, you already have the awareness, you already have the experience. Start by reclaiming something small. One piece of your time, your energy, your attention, and give it back to yourself. That's how realignment begins. Not by reinventing everything, but by finally returning to what's real. Now, all that's left is to begin, not from scratch, but from experience. If this hit close to home, don't rush to fix everything at once. Sometimes it starts with just understanding why you felt stuck. My last video, 7 Things I Wish I Knew in My 20s, goes a little deeper into that. Real lessons that could save you years of frustration. You can start there next.